All right, we're live. Hi, everyone. How are you? We are here to kind of celebrate the grand finale of Chris's Underdogs book reading. And this is just part one. There's more to come. At least I hope so, right? I mean, there are more books out
Mhm.
there. I hope the book readings are coming too.
Well,
Um,
it's too much fun, yeah.
but Chris has been up to some really wonderful things. He published two new books. And then after that, Chris, you were telling me about something. You were telling me about Underdogs Uprising, right?
Yes, basically, the latest news is that it's almost completely complete. There's a few bits of typesetting to do. There's finalising the cover, and beyond that, it's basically ready. And everyone is finally going to find out how the war ends.
Well, um, I, for one, hope that all of my favorite characters are still alive when we reach that end of the Underdogs Uprising. But that being said, yes, Rofe. Hi. It's been a crazy ride. I would love to have you on stream, Rofe. So if you want to be on the stream, let us know. We'll send you a link. But that being said, Chris, do you mind recapping everything, like in a nutshell?
Hmm.
What's going on? Like not everything, but kind of like a brief summary because we're gonna end it today. So I want everybody to have like if there's something
Okay.
watching. So
So, yeah, the whole of book one has revolved around the destruction of the clone factory and also finding out who on earth Shannon is, why she was being chased by Keith Tyler, and why she happened to know everyone's, well, have a list of everyone's names and backgrounds and things. And after the strike team, Ewan, Charlie, Kate, and Jack spent 2 days trapped in the inner city prison of New London. They're finally out, and having established that um, actually, I'm not sure if you're supposed to know that yet. So I'm going to assume that you don't. But basically, the rest of the story has kind of become fairly simplified now. It's now boiled down to the fact that the strike team have escaped the inner city prison, and instead of running home, Ewan's decided, let's not go through all this for nothing. Let's burn that clone factory to the ground. So he sent Kate and Jack to destroy the clone factory. Jack having this enormous minigun that, and he's lugging it up the stairs all the way up to, I think it's floor F. And Ewan and Charlie, as much as Ewan would love to see the destruction of the clone factory, he and Charlie are raiding an officer's sector, partly as a bit of a distraction, and partly because, well, inside an officer's sector, there's information that's may be rather useful. And the very, very last we heard, I'm using for this special occasion, I'm using literally
yeah.
my copy of this, the one that's been personally signed by Steve Silberman, who wrote a quote for it on the back. And I believe it is, yeah, chapter 24 was the last one we wrote. And I've described it as the least cliffhangery chapter of all the ones approaching the end. And it's where Ewan and Charlie have managed to hack open the door to the officers' sector, and they've just walked inside. And that's it. Right. So
Yeah.
if you give me a second, I've got the thing is because today is the day that what we love most about life has just been delivered to the door. And everyone else's doors in the UK. My notifications are going absolutely haywire. So I need to find a way of not being in a position for anyone to distract me. And part of that is going to be closing a bunch of tabs, and a part of it is moving this to a new Chrome window by itself. And the other part is putting my phone on flight mode. I have learned recently that flight mode is not just for aeroplanes. It is to stop your phone from going off at all hours of the night, and just even if your phone wasn't going to go off anyway, the assurance that it isn't going to go off, mechanically it cannot go off, It's just nice and relaxing.
It is. I love flight
So,
mode.
right. So here I am, totally undistracted, and believe me, I need to be undistracted for this because, yeah, warning, there shall be violence.
Ooh, okay. Let me get a sip of coffee too, so that I'm well prepared.
Mhm. Chapter 25. The comms unit was as dark as always. Oh, we're back at comms. But somehow it felt full of life. McCormick was holding back tears of joy. It was ludicrous that Ewan, Kate, Charlie, and Jack could all be alive, let alone on their way to destroying the clone factory. But it was happening nonetheless. To his side, Gracie was smiling too. It was unusual for her to display positivity so openly. She normally needed permission from her peers before looking too happy. How long until Alex calls back? She asked. Not long. To his credit, Alex had acted fast for a man with a gunshot wound. Oh, yeah, remember Alex has been sheltering in a bungalow about a mile away from the citadel, just hoping that the teenagers would manage to break out. McCormick had called him the moment Ewan had hung up. According to Raj, Kate said the escape would happen at dawn, so Alex had been instructed to switch his phone on and off every 15 minutes from 4 in the morning. It had given decent communication chances without the risk of being tracked. He was running to New London at that moment, armed with no more than a telescopic handgun with 5 bullets. Well, yeah, he was given that like right back in chapter 4 or something like that. A bread knife that he'd need to use wrong-handed thanks to his shoulder, and a bag of stolen supplies from the house. Very little edible food remained, but lighters and batteries were always useful. And with those supplies, he was tasked with creating an escape route for his friends. The phone rang. Gracie, with unusual enthusiasm, seized the phone first. The smartphone screen showed grass beneath Alex's boots before he switched the camera to show a squinting face. I can barely imagine how he feels, McCormick thought, with sunlight above his eyes and soil beneath his feet for the first time in half a week. Hello? Gracie said. Gracie, said Alex, I still don't believe you. Are you sure it wasn't all a pretty little dream? No, I heard it right from Ewan. They're on their way out. They spend 3 days in the inner city prison, find an exit that nobody else can use, and now they're frolicking towards the exit like the whole thing never happened. Try again, dear. Don't call me dear. Sorry, dear, but you have to admit, Alex, you chauvinistic bloody know-it-all, McCormick barked, leaning his face in front of the phone's camera. Stop belittling Gracie and do something useful. Where are you right now? About 10 minutes from the water place, and I still don't think it's a good idea. Can't you find them a different exit? No, and if the water treatment centre's guarded, you'll be needed there even more. It will be guarded, sir, Alex said miserably. I shot my way out through the same route. I'm the reason the odds will be against the others. It was unlike Alex to blame himself for anything. McCormick could not afford for him to wallow in misery when his position was so important, so he changed the subject. Alex, your camera's not moving around. Why are you stood still? Because of these. Alex switched the camera to the floor again. McCormick and Gracie were met with a disgusting sight of decomposed clone bodies on the grass. Remember the ones right from the start of the story before the strike team broke in? They thought, oh, these must be the clones that Shannon killed. And then they just carried on into the Citadel. Well, 2 days later, they're pretty much fully decomposed now. There was nothing recognizable left of them, just bone dust inside 3 empty uniforms. Shannon killed these guys the night we found her. Hopefully, one had the same size clothes as me. But first, give me a second. I just need to prove that I'm right. McCormick couldn't see what Alex did next. He knew he was heading to the peak of the grass bank and had laid himself down to the ground, but the phone saw only sky. Yeah, Alex whispered into the phone. There were dozens of snipers on top of the Citadel walls. Their barrels are pointed at the water treatment tunnel. How can you... Telescopic handgun, remember? They'll be covering the emergency exits, in case the water treatment centre troops flush them out. McCormick lay his head in his hands. To his left, Gracie's smile had vanished. What are you going to do? She asked. My father taught me a ton of lessons about fighting, Alex said. Remember, he was a Taekwondo coach. The moral of the story is don't lose. People who give up don't have souls. Yeah, he was a very toxic Taekwondo coach. You've said all this before, said McCormick, hoping it would hurry him. Really? Yes, but you were bleeding out at the time. Oh, fine. Dad may have been an authoritative tyrant, but some of his lessons were useful. And right now, his voice is in my head, telling me what kind of fights to avoid. The water place is one of them. There's no wind there. Alex picked up the phone, shuffled down the grass bank, stood up and started to walk. You abandoning them? Gasped McCormick. Not a chance. I'm just doing this my way. McCormick gave a reserved smile. The underdog's self-appointed lone wolf was isolated, vastly outnumbered, and the only one in a position to come up with a workable plan. But on the plus side, that was how Alex operated best. Alex's hand entered the camera's field of vision, bent down to one of the dead clones, and ripped the radio from its pocket. Now, if you excuse me, I've got to shake the dust out of these uniforms and try them on. I'll try not to think about the little clouds of clone powder I'll be breathing in. See you soon. Stay safe, Alex. Safe? Asked Alex, in preparation for hanging up the phone. Do you want the others rescued or not?
I think McCormick's is in a very difficult situation. Like he has to choose who to put in danger, right?
Yep, that's the thing about military command. You cannot keep everyone safe, and sometimes you've got to prioritise some over others. Okay, new paragraph. Well, new scene. Ewan knew it was just a reception, an interim room before the proper officers' sector, but he had still experienced more. He had still expected more, excuse me. The computer desk and telephone on his left, even the A4 watercolour painting on the opposite wall, were quite an anticlimax. But still, that painting was the first hint of culture he had ever seen inside the Citadel walls. An unmanned reception? Asked Charlie. Looks like today's on our side. Yeah, muttered Ewan. We should invade at 4 a.m. more often. He jogged to the second security door and dialed in the same 8-digit code. Ewan and Charlie barged their way through the unlocked door and found themselves surrounded by pure magic. There was friendly wallpaper spread across the walls and sky blue paint on the ceiling as if to imitate the outside world. There were no corridors, just rooms like a normal house. They were separated by wooden doors, the contours from their original trees still visible. The entrance room had 2 leather sofas, a widescreen television, and a vast DVD and video game collection, and an electric guitar in the corner. I'm absolutely taking that guitar home, declared Charlie. Mate, keep your eyes on the door, Ewan commanded. I need to run. Maybe we should watch a movie while I'm waiting. I've missed those. You'll get us killed if your attention span lets you down. Ignore the rest of the room, as awesome as it is. Ewan turned to run, as Charlie picked up a sofa by one end and turned it to face the entrance. Charlie, Ewan shouted behind him, stand near the first secure door, not the second. You don't want to give away the reception area for free. Come on, Ewan, it's a good sofa. Not got time to argue, Charlie, just do it. Ewan made a point of not looking back as he left the room. The officer's sector may have been important, but it wasn't big. It took Ewan less than 2 minutes to find the most promising room, the only office with the light switched on. The person inside had probably worked all night. Ewan burst through the door and planted 3 bullets in the man at the desk, who fell forwards without resistance. Ewan pushed his chair into the far corner, trying his best not to look at the man's name badge. He failed. The human he had killed was called Stephen Elcott. 3 humans now, he thought. The first was a takeover day screw-up. You actually don't know who that is unless you're very good at putting dots together. The second was to defend Ruth Rowland when he killed the Lord. This was my first kill that felt quick and emotionless. Bloody hell, the inner city must have scraped away my humanity after all. As Ewan always did with thoughts he didn't like, he pushed it to the back of his mind and pretended it didn't exist. He looked at the computer, still logged on with a wealth of humans-only information at his fingertips. His first stop was the CCTV cameras. Elcott must have been the highest-ranked man in the area, since he had video access to everywhere in the officers' sector. Ewan found Charlie sat in reception as commanded, fidgeting in the swivel chair behind the desk. Ewan bit his lip. That meant Elcott might have seen them coming and called for help. It was impossible to tell. Okay, he said to himself, switching the screen away from the cameras and navigating to the personnel database. Let's go. It didn't take long to find the search option. First name, Shannon. Last name, Rose. Click search. There were plenty of results, none of them useful. Some were about random people called Shannon, and others were about people with the surname Rose. Some had Rose as their first name or Shannon as their last, their names ordered wrong in the database. There were over 100 profiles, and reading through 2 per minute would take half an hour, maybe. Ewan didn't have time to do the maths. Screw it, he said, and returned to the search box to try something else. First name, Ewan. Last name, West. Click search. That did the trick. The top result was clearly him. Ewan did not have time to read, but trembled at what he saw. His school history was there. His father's military background was there. The death of his 8-year-old cousin Alfie was there. His time with Terrorist Faction 001 was also there. That obviously meant the Underdogs, because one click led him to everyone else's names too. A further search returned no results for any terrorist faction 002. Ewan felt a moment of despondent loneliness upon realising how isolated he and his friends truly were. But that feeling was such familiar territory that he was able to move on from it quickly. The list of names was identical to the one Shannon had brought to Spitfire's Rise, and a click on the Additional Notes tab confirmed what Ewan had feared. The information really had come from a reliable source. Daniel Amopoulos, his friend and former Oakenfold student, really had been the one who gave Nicholas Grant their names. Daniel had always been a headstrong guy, so the torture he must have endured before his death must have been unspeakable. Over the course of 5 minutes, Ewan spammed the printer with a long queue of demands: the Underdogs page, his own page, each of his housemates' pages, and all the while he tried to answer the 3-day-old question in his head. Why aren't we dead? Daniel was taken almost a month ago. He didn't know our location, but he knew everyone's names. Our old houses would be the most obvious place for Grant to check. Why didn't he send an army to McCormick's listed address and annihilate us? I think you found out in the last reading that Spitfire's Rise is actually McCormick's house. In fact, what's stopping them from doing it tomorrow? There will be plenty of time to panic back at Spitfire's Rise. In the meantime, he had the opportunity to print off some plans. The really useful ones would be classified, but Ewan probably had access to some interesting hints. With yet more documents sent to the printer, Ewan tried to think of more topics to search. Last time he had checked, there was still a health centre in Hartford that needed searching. Oh yeah, because they have no idea that Mark and the others searched that. A thought struck Ewan like a flash of lightning. There may be no results for Shannon, but first name blank, last name Lambourne. Click search. 6 results, but only one was a lieutenant, and the report about him was damning. Lieutenant Lambourne was a traitor? More than that, he was a code-writing genius. Probably explains where Better Days came from. And for unknown reasons, he fled New London with his girlfriend being... oh, bloody hell. Just like that, Ewan had stumbled across a link to Shannon. Without hesitation, he clicked and read. The report was completely censored, except for the essentials: name, gender, date of birth, nationality, but that information alone was enough. I guess this explains why my first search didn't work. It also explains why she killed Keith Tyler, and why she killed him mid-sentence. This lovely lady is Shannon Rose, as I think he phrased it. Ewan took a deep breath. This was bound to change things. He reached for his phone. McCormick needed to know this at the first opportunity. But before he could switch it on, Charlie's voice sounded in his radio. Ewan, problem. Ewan grabbed his radio with one hand and used the other to switch back to the CCTV cameras. Charlie was at the back of the reception, his assault rifle pointed at the closed entrance. Talk to me, Charlie. Footsteps outside. Sounds like they're dragging the bodies somewhere. Any idea how many? No, but more than one. Ewan flipped between the CCTV channels to find that, unforgivably, there were no cameras outside the officer's sector entrance. Ewan, came a faint whisper. They're using the dial pad. When he flipped back to the reception camera, Charlie was next to the entrance door and shielding himself against the wall. Charlie, you know the door will open straight into you, right? Yep. Ewan checked the printer. It was almost done. By the time he ran to Charlie, helped him, then ran back, his papers would be ready. But time had already run out. The security door opened before Ewan could take his first step, and 6 clean soldiers flooded into the reception. Thankfully, each of them was facing the wrong direction. Charlie leaned out from behind the entrance door and opened fire into their backs. 4 went down straight away, and the other 2 staggered for a few more seconds before Charlie finished them off. Clever move, Ewan said into his radio. Charlie did not answer and started to push the door closed. It wouldn't budge at first, thanks to the legs of a dead clone blocking its path. Ewan collected the centimetre-thick pile that the printer had finished during the fight. Since Kate had the rucksack, he stuffed the paper inside his combat clothes, his belt holding it against his body. That was the moment a thought occurred to Ewan, an important one that had not yet occurred to Charlie. The attack and reception had involved 6 clone soldiers, but only humans could open doors to officer sectors. Which meant... Ewan watched as a security door crashed into his friend's body, throwing him against the wall. Charlie could only stumble around in dizziness and pain before Oliver Roth leapt into the reception, pointed his handgun at Charlie's abdomen, and fired twice. Ewan's lungs lost all their air and his stomach caved in, as if he had been the one Roth had shot. He found himself hopelessly rooted to the floor as the red-haired assassin grabbed Charlie's assault rifle, tore it from his grip, and smashed the butt of it into his face. They said Marshall would send his biggest weapon. How could it have been anyone else? We've not seen Oliver Roth in quite a while. I was kind of hoping he'd forgotten. Somehow, it was worse to watch the events in silence. The CCTV was video only, and Charlie's radio was silent. The shots, the yells, and the rifle smash had not made a sound, and the inability to hear them made Ewan feel even more helpless. Charlie managed to scramble to the other side of the reception desk before falling. For a reason Ewan couldn't understand, Roth did not stop him. Maybe he saw no point in worrying over a wounded, unarmed enemy with a mangled face. Instead, he marched for the second security door. For as long as Ewan had known Charlie, his ADHD-related impulses had been categorized as bad behavior. There had only ever been the reasons behind his dreadful judgments, his behavioral problems, and everything else that made people see him as the wrong kind of person. But once in a while, his impulses served him well. Against all the screams that must have come from his nervous system, Charlie jumped to his feet, ripped the phone from its cord, and threw it straight at Roth's head. This is a landline phone, by the way. While the assassin shielded himself, Charlie ran for the second security door with the desk lamp in his hand and smashed its heavy base against the dial pad until there was nothing left of it. Roth would have no access to the officer's sector and no access to Ewan. A third bullet to Charlie's side dropped him to the floor. Ewan threw up in his mouth, but swallowed it. Charlie fell out of shot against the wall, under the CCTV camera. Roth leant down next to him, then came back into view with Charlie's radio in his hand. "Ewan, I assume?" asked Oliver Roth. Ewan did not answer. "I know it's you. It's your name he's screaming." Roth strolled through the room with the overconfident body language of a school bully, like the person he must have been a year or two earlier. After moving the dead clone's leg and pushing the security door shut, he turned back to Charlie and spoke to Ewan over the radio. "Let's play a game of where are the bullets? Are they buried in his muscles? Have they drilled through his intestines? Has one of them touched a kidney?" Roth's taunts were touching the pressure points in Ewan's brain. Regardless, he gave no response. "I take it Stephen Elcott's dead. Poor guy. His family will have to be thrown into the inner city now. Got any tips for them?" Ewan broke his silence for no reason other than anger. "So Grant didn't kill you after you fell for my laser cannon trick?" "Nope, sorry. And nice work with the blood footprints, by the way. They kept me guessing for almost 10 seconds. Roth stepped backwards and looked up at the camera, tilting his helmet back so Ewan could see his whole face. "Those bullets won't kill him, you know. If I wanted him dead, I'd have done it. Still, got to admire him for taking that third bullet to stop me getting to you. Now he's smashed the dial pad, it has to be you who comes to me. And why the hell would I do that? Partly because it's your only way out, and partly because every 60 seconds your friend gets an extra bullet. I'll see you in a minute, Ewan." Roth switched off the radio, leaned back against the reception desk, and checked his watch. At the lowest part of the screen, Charlie's feet could be seen trembling. Ewan checked the ammunition in his assault rifle. He had only used 5 bullets that morning, so there were plenty left, but his infected arm remained in bad shape, so any hand-to-hand combat would not go well. Ewan bolted from Stephen Elcott's office with his rifle held high, wondering how many seconds remained before bullet number 4. He ran through the neat rooms of the officer's sector, which somehow didn't seem so beautiful anymore. Before long, he was back at the entrance hall, catching his breath between the leather sofa and the electric guitar. It was time to take on Oliver Roth single-handed and do whatever he could to save his temper twin. Ewan turned the handle, threw the door open, and aimed his weapon around the side of the door. He saw Charlie a few meters away, bloody, wide-eyed, and taking panicked breaths. But nothing of Roth was visible, except for a hand that poked around the side of the desk, holding Charlie's assault rifle. At the sight of Ewan, it fired, spraying a flurry of bullets into Charlie's chest. End of chapter 25. I know. You see why we only did 2 chapters last time?
Yeah. I mean, let's just continue reading before I know that Charlie's, I just want to know that he's okay. He gets okay in the end.
He's got lots of bullets to the chest. I'm very sorry, but he's not okay.
Well, he might
But I will
be
just
by the end of chapter 26.
I admire your hope, but if you want me to carry on reading, I will keep reading. But it's not good.
Does anyone have any questions before Chris moves on to the next chapter? Yeah, I don't think there are questions, Chris. Please continue reading.
I think, yes, we're doing. Chapter 26. Surprise, retard! Ewan took his eyes away from his best friend's dead body and saw Oliver Roth jumping to his feet, his pistol in one hand and Charlie's assault rifle in the other. As Roth opened fire, Ewan ran from the entrance door, scrambled over the leather cushions, and sheltered behind the sofa. His rifle shook in his grip. There was no way he could aim accurately in his panicked state. A barrage of aggressive, echoing bangs kept him in place. Bullets punctured their way through the sofa and smashed the flat-screen television on the back wall. Ewan pressed himself to the carpet, Roth's bullets zipping inches above his body. At the sound of the first click, he threw his hands over the ruined sofa and opened fire, only to find that Roth had hidden himself behind the door. Anger forced Ewan to keep firing, uncontrollable anger just like the old days, and he swore at the top of his voice once his chamber was empty. He had wasted the only clip he had. I fought for years to be less impulsive. Roth has brought out the worst in me. When Ewan inhaled, he noticed he was crying. In the background, he heard a clip of bullets sliding into Roth's handgun. Something large hit the floor, possibly Charlie's empty assault rifle. That's something I try to make sure happens in most action movies or action books. You don't get people crying when they're in the middle of action, but frankly, this is a situation that earns it. Hiding behind the sofa, mate. Seriously, this is war, not an episode of Doctor Bloody Who. Ewan heard the click-clack of the pistol's topside, followed by a high-pitched laugh. It was difficult to remember that Oliver Roth was 14, except when his voice did that. Ewan sneaked out from behind the sofa and stood at the side of the door. You've lost, mate, Roth snarled as he walked through the doorframe. Might as well come out and face... Ewan answered with the electric guitar in his grip, which he swung by its neck straight into Roth's face. The shock was enough for Roth to drop the pistol, but not enough to knock him unconscious. Another swing of the guitar struck him at the side of the neck, and Roth couldn't react before Ewan reached under his helmet, grabbed a fistful of his red hair, and dragged him inside the room. His clumsiness sent them into the sofa, which toppled backwards and threw him into the carpet. Before he could find his bearings, Ewan found himself pinned to the ground. When he looked up, Roth reached for the knife in his belt. As his hand snatched at the assassin's wrist, the podcopter wound tore itself open even wider. Ewan let out a scream, but kept his grip firm. The knife inched closer anyway. Ewan noticed his assault rifle next to the sofa. He thrust out his spare arm, his fingers touching the muzzle tip and stroking it closer, millimeters at a time. Roth's twitching blade was so close to Ewan's face, the two blurred knives appeared in his vision, held by two blurred hands. But his rifle had been brought close enough. It's empty, you idiot, Roth said, with the voice of a 1950s schoolteacher to a dumb student. Guns don't tend to harm people when they don't have any bullets. Ewan wrapped his fingers around the butt of the rifle, thrust it into Roth's face, and broke his nose. One of my favourite parts of the story. As the screaming assassin tended to the cartilage in several pieces inside his face, Ewan drew back his feet and kicked Roth into the air. Before his enemy could steady himself, Ewan leapt over the sofa, dashed into the reception, and snatched the nearest dead clone's assault rifle. He span around, his thirst for revenge filling the friend-shaped hole in his heart, and aimed at the rising figure with the blooded nose. Ewan West and Oliver Roth made eye contact, but it did not last long. Ewan pulled the trigger. The bullets may have travelled at hundreds of miles per hour, but he had fired too late. By the time it had left the chamber, Roth had delivered the jumping kick of his life, sailed over the sofa, and knocked the security door shut. The bullets ricocheted off the door and settled somewhere on the ground. Ewan glanced at the destroyed dial pad, then yelled to the ceiling and sent an angry kick against the reception desk. When it didn't move, he lifted its edges and hauled it onto its side, scattering its contents across the floor. Charlie's murderer was sealed inside the officer's sector, and the duel was over. Oliver Roth would live to fight another day. The trail of Charlie's blood touched the tip of Ewan's boots. Ewan looked at his friend and wiped the mixture of tears and sweat from his face. He wouldn't be able to close Charlie's eyes like heroes did in war movies. His eyelids were already squeezed shut. His fine expression stuck to his face. Ewan racked his brains for something to say, to pay his final respects to his friend and temper twin. But it would mean nothing, and he knew it. He picked up Charlie's radio from the floor. Roth had dropped it in favour of holding two weapons, then reached into Charlie's pocket and retrieved his mobile phone. It contained photos the survivors at home needed to see. New London's inner city, the prison that Charlie Coleman had entered and left with barely a scratch, only to wind up dead an hour after his escape. There were no words. Ewan simply turned away from his friend, opened the first security door, and fled into the depths of floor S. Kate was in panic mode. She had run to the top of the stairwell, Jack following with the minigun, and they had been collapsed together on floor F when when Oliver's voice had come through Charlie's radio. Their friend was wounded, and Ewan had been given 60 seconds. That was the last they had heard. McCormick had not taken it well. She had broken the news whilst phoning for instructions on using the memory stick, leaving him in no fit state to give guidance, and her in no fit state to listen. Thankfully, the instructions weren't complicated. "You're sure there wasn't a thinner stairwell?" Kate asked, pointing down through the hollow chamber in the middle that allowed large objects to be transported. "It'll be 10 times quicker on the way down," replied Jack between gasps. "Trust me." He rose to his feet and picked up the minigun in 2 tied hands. "Time to go, Kate. The others had been enough of a distraction." Kate stood up, wondering how much their friends had sacrificed to give them an undetected run to the clone factory. She opened the door and allowed Jack into the corridor first, the huge barrel of the minigun leading the way. 5 minutes passed without incident, an incredible luxury for a floor so high. Kate reached the door that she and Alex had broken through several days earlier, back in the innocent times before she had known the inner city. "New London Clone Factory, Alpha Control Room," its sign read. Kate scanned her keycard over the pad, but was greeted with a red LED. Perhaps Grant had learned from his mistakes and locked down the factory as soon as they had escaped the inner city. Out the way, Kate," said Jack. "Are you going to—" "Yep. Cover your ears." Kate stepped out of the minigun's path and did as Jack advised. Jack squeezed the trigger and emptied the last of its ammunition into a door that couldn't possibly have been built to resist it. Through squinted eyes, Kate noticed that Jack was concentrating his fire around the edges of the lock. The strategy worked. A hand-sized chunk of door remained attached to the electromagnetic lock, but the rest of the door broke free and swung open. The sights, the sounds, and the smell of burning metal were overwhelming. Kate's brain felt like it was under attack, as if the clones inside had thrown some kind of sensory grenade into her face. "No matter," she thought in an almost drunken stupor. "I'm doing this anyway." Kate staggered through the door as Jack dropped the minigun behind her, which released a sudden clang on the floor which almost tipped her over the edge. She aimed her assault rifle at the surprised clones in the control room and opened fire, killing 2 of them instantly. As she tried to steady her balance, the 3rd clone shot her. Kate fell to the floor as if the bullet had killed her instantly. As far as she could tell, she was still alive, and her bloody hands crawled around to seek out the wound, but her brain would not let her feel where it was. It was too busy dealing with a traffic jam of overwhelming sensations. This is why James never felt pain during a meltdown, her brother. Why he never knew he was injuring himself. "James, I left you again. I still love you, more than anyone." Before a second bullet could strike, Jack leapt in and finished off the final clone. The sound of the gunshot, loud and uncomfortable as it was, signaled the end of the sensory assault. She tried to ground herself, lay her hands on the cold floor, and focused on the air as it whistled it through her throat. As she did so, a throbbing pain emerged from the right side of her waist. It's a flesh wound, Kate," said Jack as he knelt down beside her. "Not deadly, just a pain in the neck. Well, a pain in his side, actually." Kate found the wound with her right hand. It felt like Jack was right. He certainly didn't seem panicked, as far as she could tell. "Overload?" he asked with an outstretched hand. "Yeah." In Kate's Celtic head, it helped to know that Jack understood. Not many others would have done. She grabbed his wrist and winced as he pulled her to her feet. Kate found herself wobbling to the computer chair, where she sat down and retrieved Shannon's memory stick. "I've just noticed that everyone's cameras are off except mine. You can still hear me, yeah?" Phew. Retrieved Shannon's memory stick. Better days? I guess that's what Shannon was hoping for. She inserted it into the computer, correctly on the 3rd attempt. "Jack," she mumbled, "throw the kill switch. Look out the window when I do. You'll want to see this." Kate lifted her head. The view of the clone factory floor below was as incredible and horrifying as it had been the first time. The uncountable pipes and tubes that kept the system in order, the glowing lights of the pods, and the fitness of the 2-minute-old clones that strolled out of them. There was a creaking noise behind her as Jack pulled the red lever. 1 moment later, everything stopped on the factory floor. The humming noises fell silent. The lights on the pods went out. The clones themselves, whether guards or freshly grown recruits, began to wander around the dead factory in confusion. "We've not got long before they come for us, Kate." Kate nodded and opened the computer's database. The file on the memory drive was easy enough to find. Betterdays.exe. Hardly imaginative, but it doesn't need to be. She ran the software that had sparked their half-week mission, expecting some kind of on-screen victory display. Instead, she got a normal and boring progress bar, which ended with a simple message. Updates installed. Please restart clone factory hardware. It was hardly a fanfare. It just seemed like a regular run-of-the-mill update. Then again, that must have been deliberate. Jack, it's time. She turned around to see Jack twitching in either excitement or nervousness. He took a deep breath and pushed the lever back to its original position. Before Kate could turn around, there was a dreadful metallic groan from the factory floor. She looked down and grinned. The confused clones were backing towards the emergency exit. Pipes were splitting and flooding the factory floor with different coloured liquids. Awkward whirs and rupture sounds came from inside the clone pods. Some of them tremored in place until their glass sides shattered, spreading soups of thickened slush and half-grown bodies across the floor. The electrical equipment on the ground began to short-circuit. "You've got a lighter in there, right?" asked Kate, pointing to the rucksack. "Waterproof matches. And we've still got the dynamite?" "Let me guess what you're thinking." Jack lifted his assault rifle and shattered the front window as Kate rose to her feet. Somehow, her flesh wound had stopped bothering her. She reached into the rucksack, then plucked out the matches and the small stick of dynamite. It didn't need to be big to do its job. Kate tossed the lit dynamite through the window and awaited the fireworks. They did not disappoint. The flames rippled outwards, lighting up the entire factory in a blaze of orange and blue, stretching as far as Kate's eyes could see. Pods exploded across the factory floor like popcorn in a pan. Streaks of white-hot fire lit up along the rows of burning pipes, and the sight of the flaming sea was underscored by beautiful crackles and roars. "Whoa," said Jack in amazement, his fingers stimming like never before. "That is the coolest thing I've ever seen." Kate grinned. "Didn't you once see an ankylosaurus at the Natural History Museum?" Jack laughed and corrected himself. "Okay, fine. That is the second coolest thing I've ever seen." End of chapter 26.
Charlie is no longer with us. Kate's
He's
been
not, I'm
shot,
afraid.
but she's fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to process though.
Yeah.
Kind of like remember all the events leading to what just happened, and I'm like, okay.
Mm. Yeah, and when you read it for a second time, it's especially cruel because he's counting down to his birthday, and when they're waiting to break out in New London, he says, "Oh, I'm finally old enough to join the real army now." And there's this one really devastating line from just a few chapters ago. Yeah, when Ewan's walking around saying hello to each of the well, not saying hello, but having a bit of a brief with each of his soldiers before the attempt to break out of New London. He goes to Charlie, and here we go. Outside, the Lord and his 4 henchmen were positioned atop the roofs, weapons in hand and grins on faces. It would not be long. Then Ewan says, "Charlie, happy birthday, mate. 1 year closer to death and 1 year closer to death and all that." And then Charlie just goes, "Cheers," and then goes on, but he has no idea that he's got an hour left to live.
Yeah.
And the book number 4 is just about to come out, and I still really miss Charlie.
But I never, like, amongst all of the underdogs, Charlie, Ewan, and Kate, I thought that they're gonna make it to the end. So Charlie was kind of like it was a shock. It was a shock for me.
You mean you weren't optimistic about Jack's chances?
Well, I mean, Jack, yeah, I could have expected Jack or Alex but Charlie, Ewan, and Kate, they were like, in my mind, they were going to make it to the end of the books, like all the series.
Yeah, that's kind of a bit of a harsh introduction to the fact that my characters basically do not have plot armor.
Okay, well.
And Charlie's death is kind of a factor in Ewan's series arc, and I'm not going to say anything beyond literally that sentence, but I think one of the extra reasons.
I have a question.
Yeah.
when you started writing the book,
Mhm.
did you have the storyline in mind that Charlie is going to die at this point, or did it just kind of like turn into a series of events where you felt like, this is a good,
I
or not a
knew
good?
all along that a character was going to die in the first book, and originally it was going to be kind of a minor character, but then when I wrote the first draft, there was kind of a connection between Ewan and, well, he was called Chris at the time, spelled Kris, but
Mhm.
um, then a kind of when it became the modern Underdogs, I renamed him Charlie, and basically that he and Ewan were best friends, and then I decided to write in the whole temper twins thing because that made complete sense in context. And I didn't. I'd like to think that I didn't build up this relationship just to make it more shocking when he dies, but simply because it was an entirely realistic thing to happen in Ewan and Charlie's world. They would get on very well. They would become like temper twins, and Charlie, yeah, he kind of accidentally became quite a major character who ended up dying at the end, which wasn't originally the plan. I just knew that someone was going to die. I just hadn't intended for him to become such a major character. But I think the reason why I felt that um, I couldn't have every single one of them surviving was because it almost would have felt kind of insulting to the reader. I mean, this mission was dangerous as hell. I mean, it was an absolutely ridiculous, dangerous mission. And okay, yeah, Alex got shot in the shoulder. Is that it? Oh yeah, and Ewan got a podcopter wound. In terms of being honest with the reader, I felt that there had to be something really big.
Okay. I mean, I understand your point of view, and I understand where you're coming from. But why
But it
Charlie?
hurts. Yeah,
Um,
I do feel like I wonder whether I made a bit of a mistake killing off the funniest underdog in the first book.
it's yeah. I mean, I for a minute I can't imagine Ewan without Charlie and Charlie. It's just kind of like we've known them as temper twins, so it's. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's do chapter 7. Rofe, was Charlie your favorite character too?
Mhm.
And Steph, I hope everything's okay. Um, it's also a 10 out of great writing than a yes. Yes, Rofe. Chris is a great writer.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. But
Chris, I'm a fan,
it's,
okay? Just because I'm upset that Charlie has died doesn't mean that I don't like your writing. I love your writing, but I'm
oh yeah,
still upset.
yes. Well, a reader recently told me that they threw their copy of Tooth and Nail across the room at some point during the so, and that was quite a compliment.
It is. I mean, if you can make a reader do that, my
Oh
friend,
yes.
you've succeeded as a writer.
My partner, before she was my partner, she was basically Underdog's biggest fan before it was published, and she was the one who came with the nickname UB. But there are other
Nicknames.
things that I've been called in future novels.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not specifying that there will be because of death necessarily. Don't forget, UB wasn't about a death, but
Okay.
yeah, it's nice when you get people insulting you because you made them feel things. That was probably quite an inappropriate moment to say that, given what just happened to Charlie, and I do kind of mourn this fictional character quite a lot. But I wrote 3 novels whilst missing Charlie. He does get mentioned quite a lot in
In
the
the
following
future
ones because he
novels.
was such a big part of Ewan's life.
Yeah, I mean, this came out of like nowhere. Like this was the last thing. Well, not even the last thing. I mean, I didn't expect this to happen at all. I have a message for Aisha. She's trying to get into the StreamYard. But Aisha, it says that your mic and camera are not connected, so I can't add you to the stream until they're connected. So, oh, now they're connected, so I'm going to add you to the stage. Okay, now that you've joined, why don't you kind of come on and say something as well? All right, while we wait for Aisha to do that, Chris, why don't we continue with chapter
Okay.
27?
I'm
Okay,
just gonna
chapter 27.
this is gonna
The,
just stay in my mind for a very long time. That's why I'm like that.
Aisha, we can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now?
yeah,
Okay,
it's a bit
so
echoey, but we can. Okay. Shall I continue?
Oh, that's a good idea, Rofe. Chris.
Oh, I like the idea, but I also know specifically how clones are made, and this is something you don't learn until Tooth and Nail.
Okay.
And
There can't be
basically,
such thing as
you
good
can't make a
clones.
clone out of a dead body, basically. So, imagine that. Imagine if you could make clones out of dead bodies. They would probably have made a clone of the dead body of Daniel and then just set him free and followed him. Actually, no, because Daniel wasn't able to tell. Okay, never mind. I'm just thinking out loud. But yeah, thank you / sorry, Aisha. Okay, shall I give you something new to stick in your mind?
Hey, Chris. I need
Yeah,
to step out for about 2 quick minutes. I'll be right back. But you guys continue. I'll be right back, okay?
I shall. Do you want me to start reading?
Well, can you guys talk about like something else?
Oh yes.
It's just
Yep.
2 minutes and I'll be right
Yeah,
back. I don't want to miss this.
no problem. Yeah, I didn't think you did. Okay. So, yeah, any questions? Any comments? Any hate mail?
I'm still really sad about Charlie and all the conversation that we've had. I'm trying to process it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
I have,
lot.
yeah. I have spent this whole week thinking about. Oh, I get. It's the Underdogs finale on Wednesday. Oh, this is gonna be good. Oh, wait, no, they're starting on chapter 25, and yeah, I'm kind of actually
So
relieved now
obviously,
that it's over.
yeah, you obviously knew what was coming. I haven't
Oh
read the
yeah.
book because I don't have it, so it was a complete surprise. It's just oh no.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it wasn't a. It wasn't a chapter ending I was looking forward to reading. Well, you could probably tell by at the end of chapter 25, I just closed the books at the end of chapter 25, and there was just silence. And I thought, this silence is warranted.
It is,
Thank you,
yes.
Steph. Mm, yeah.
Well, I am actually hoping for maybe a little bit of a happy ending. Would that be something that I can hope for?
Well, the clone factory has just been destroyed quite beautifully.
Oh yeah,
Now,
that's yes.
now the others just need to find a way of making it out alive, even though the water treatment center is devastatingly well guarded and there are snipers on the roof of the Citadel walls. So yeah, there's that.
All right.
That's peak anxiety now.
Okay, well, let's resolve the anxiety quickly and see what happens. Chapter 27. Ewan launched himself down the stairwell without checking behind corners, not even trying to stem the blood that flowed from his opened arm wound. His intellect told him there was still more to lose, but the rest of his mind disagreed. He found stairwell 42, burst through the door, and was greeted with the sound of rattling chain echoing from the chamber above. Told you it would be faster on the way down, came a voice he recognized as Jack's. Jack's alive, and he must be talking to Kate. Only one underdog will be added to the memorial wall, for now at least. Ewan shielded himself against the wall as the metal pulley ground to a halt above floor Y. His friends swung the pulley to and fro until they could grab the side railings. Kate winced as she climbed over, her torso clearly in pain. Within half a minute, the three surviving underdogs were reunited at the bottom of the stairwell, although Ewan refused to be happy. What happened with the factory? He asked, his voice dull and apathetic. Gone, answered Jack. Shannon's trick worked, and now it's burning. Seriously, mate, didn't feel like telling me then? We didn't want to use the radio, said Kate, just in case She fell silent. Ewan held up his and Charlie's radios in the same hand. Nobody in the stairwell was fluent with hints, but Ewan could see in their misery that they understood. Ewan, gasped Kate. I'm so sorry. Ewan's body flinched as her arm landed on his shoulder, and he rejected the oncoming hug. He was our friend too. Look, just don't. Seriously, let's get the hell home. Kate nodded, her eyes to the floor. Ewan turned and left the stairwell, and as he led the way, he found himself beginning to look around corners again. It was as if his friends reminded him of his responsibility, like those boy racers who drove sensibly when their parents were in the same car. They must know we're using the same exit, said Jack as he ran. What choice have we got? The closer they got to the exit tunnel, the denser the train patrols became. Thankfully, the Underdogs had more than enough stolen rifles between them, and their ammunition was replenished with every soldier they killed. Within 15 minutes, they had arrived at the exit, with even more bullets than they had started with. Ewan hauled the door backwards, ignoring the pain of his podcocked wound, and unveiled the exit tunnel like a game show prize. Wordless, the trio began their final run. When his chest started to ache, Ewan reached into his combat clothes and retrieved the stack of papers from the officers' sector. He clenched the papers in his fist, hiding his hatred for them, wishing he could run upstairs again and shove them into the printer in exchange for his friend back. Jack, he muttered, put these in the rucksack. What did you find? Asked Jack as he took the papers and packed them away. I know who Shannon is. Her whole story. I found the reports written about us now, and a few of Grant's plans. Well, nice. Ewan wondered whether to shout at Jack for his optimism, but was distracted when their radios made garbled noises. He raced further down the tunnel until the interference turned into human words. Calling teenagers, came the voice. Teenagers, come in. Alex? Asked Jack. Where have you been? Not far away, Alex answered. Spent the last 3 days getting bored in someone's house, but it sounds like I got the better deal. Are there still 4 of you? 3, snarled Ewan. The radio fell silent. Even Alex was lost for words. It was Charlie. Leave the shop for later, Ewan continued as the group accelerated. Can you tell us anything useful? Marshall and Pierce know where you're going. Tough crap, they're too late. They should have run faster. Yeah, well, Pierce was just mouthing off over the radio. He sent a specialist unit up the tunnel. And trust me, mate, it's pretty ugly. On top of that, there's 100 soldiers back at the water treatment plant in case you get that far. A low rumble, unlike any sound Ewan had heard before, emanated from not far away. There was a warm glow up ahead, where the semi-cylindrical tunnel bent to the left. Whatever was glowing, it was about to come into view. Alex, said Ewan, raising his assault rifle. What kind of specialist? Shut up a second. I can get you out of there, but you have to do absolutely what I say. Understand? Shut up a second. Ewan hesitated, and the rumble ahead dominated the silence. Every instinct in his brain told him to disobey. Alex had never seen New London. Alex hadn't watched Charlie die. Alex had no right to boss him around. Nobody told Ewan what to do. Understand, Ewan repeated. It had been Ewan's whole life. Adults who couldn't empathise with him, believing they could tell him how to live anyway. Teachers ignoring all of his anxiety to suit their own purposes and pretending it was for his benefit. Making decisions for him without getting it. He pressed the talk button on the radio, and the words, "You shut up, Alex," formed on his lips. At the last moment, he changed his mind. For all Alex's faults, for all his lack of understanding, he was doing what he could. He was offering to help, even if his wording was bad. Just for once, Ewan told himself, stop letting the PDA make your decisions. You can fight harder than this. His mind went back to the conversation with Charlie in the bedroom back at Spitfire's Rise, and the Oakenfold Code. The problems are not the person. You have this problem, but you are not this problem. And if this kind of demand could still beat you, you'd have died back in the inner city. You've earned your way out. Ewan? Fine, let's hear it, he gasped. You're about to come up against something nasty. The specialist units will try to force you through an emergency exit at the side. The snipers are waiting for you. Ewan closed his eyes. With the thought of snipers planted in his mind, he could almost feel their gun barrels aimed at the roof above, 2 feet from his head. All you need to do, Alex finished, is tell me when you reach an emergency exit, wait there, and burst out when I tell you it's safe. Can I trust you to do that? Ewan breathed in agreement, knowing he had little choice in the matter. The tunnel had grown warmer, and the low rumbles were followed by uncomfortable blasts of hot air. He had predicted flamethrowers, and he was right. Around the curve in the shortening corridor, the specialist units were dressed in a uniform Ewan had never seen. Clad in fireproof red suits with both oxygen and propane tanks clamped around their backs, the 20-ish clones pointed their flamethrower nozzles towards their unprotected victims. The clones were not just angry. They were happy. Delighted grins adorned the faces of the flamethrower unit as they felt pride in the upcoming murder of their enemies. Their onward march began. They were less than 50 meters away, and Ewan was scared. Nerves and anxiety were an everyday feeling for him and his friends, but being scared. Kate lifted her rifle, but Jack's hand battered it down. Don't, he shouted. You'll hit the canisters. The explosion would burn up all the oxygen for a mile. The front clone released a yellow belch of fire that flew like dragon's breath down the confines of the tunnel and snapped its flaming tongues just meters from Ewan's body. Sweat from his forehead trickled into his eyes, but he could still see the emergency exit halfway between him and the flamethrowers. Fine, snarled Kate at his side. No canisters. Kate gritted her teeth and squeezed her trigger finger. She sprayed every gram of ammunition from her weapon, covered every square inch from one side of the corridor to the other, and rained bullets into the clones on the front rank. But her sights had been aimed an inch lower than usual, aiming away from the explosive equipment. With thighs, knees, and shins shredded by Kate's bullets, the front half of Grant's flamethrower unit blocked the path of the others behind them. There were no screams, but their expressions of agony were clear enough. Their grins gone, the back rank knelt down to shelter their own legs, using their convulsing allies as shields. By the time they gave him, Ewan ran forward and leapt sideways into the emergency exit, his hips smashing into the bar. The exit flew open, its heavy door a perfect shelter from sniper fire, and his foot landed on soil for the first time in half a week. The young blue of a morning sky poured into the tunnel, along with an infinite supply of fresh oxygen. Alex, now! Ewan screamed as Jack railed his bullets into the propane tanks. Ewan could never have predicted the intensity of so many pressurized canisters exploding in such a confined space. The next few moments did not register in his head. An enormous blast threw him off his feet. He landed somewhere on something. His eyes opened just in time to see metallic ripples running the length of the tunnel, roaring alongside a distant vehicle checkpoint like a train passing through a station. I am such a numpty, was the only thought that could pass through his dizzy head. The ringing began to fade in his ears, and he heard Kate screaming from inside the tunnel. The phrase sensory overload would not go nearly far enough to describe how she must have felt. Jack was back there too, apologising to her. There were uniformed clones running around at the vehicle checkpoint. One of them was tall and black. He approached another figure who instantly fell to the ground as he passed, as if from a stab wound. Alex. Ewan, yelled Jack. Ewan, come back! Ewan prepared to leap to his feet, as fast as his disoriented brain would let him, but changed his mind when he saw his surroundings. He had landed at least 5 meters from the safety of the exit door, with nothing around him but dried mud. The snipers could have fired 100 bullets into me, but they didn't. They must think I died in the explosion since I've not moved. I won't give them a reason to change their mind. He tried to breathe as shallowly as possible. Through telescopic sight, maybe the snipers would see him breathing. Jack was starting to panic inside the tunnel, beginning to believe his bullets had killed his strike team leader. But Ewan couldn't afford to call out to him, or even stick up a thumb. At the distant checkpoint, Alex had seized an assault rifle from one of half a dozen dead clone soldiers. There was one more enemy standing, who had just thrown his stabbed colleague into the passenger side of a transport van. Ewan did not shoot the last clone, instead letting him clamber into the driver's seat and speed off towards the citadel. You guys all right in there? Came his voice in the radio. Just get us the hell out of here, yelled Kate. Not yet. The snipers haven't forgotten you. Give me a second and meet me at the brow of the hill when I shout. You'll want to listen to this. Ewan moved his eyes, the only part of him he dared to move, and found the van hurtling down the tarmacked road to the vehicle entrance. It was doing 50 at least. Then a faint voice from the radio. It was swamped in static, as if Alex were holding a clone's radio to his own so the whole team could listen. Soldier, came a nervous mutter. This is Arnold Salter, Deployment Director for Vehicle Port 3. Your intentions unknown. Please clarify. Good morning, Mr. Salter, Alex began, in full performance mode. On behalf of the British populace, may I present you with a token of our appreciation for your boss's hospitality. The distant van was pointed towards the vehicle port, accelerating towards its maximum speed. Ewan could only admire the driver's determination to save his wounded colleague, futile as it was. Then again, it was unlikely to be compassion. It must have been a tactical retreat. Thanks for the explosives and the Florex armory, Alex's voice continued. There were enough in there to fill the van I'm driving. There might even be enough for the explosion to reach the inner city and set the prisoners free, if I judge the run-up right. Ewan turned his eyes back to the vehicle checkpoint and saw Alex's face poking out from behind the wall. Alex seemed to be a good liar, and Ewan hoped Arnold Salter would be stupid enough to believe him. Either way, Grant's employees couldn't afford to take risks. Somewhere close to the vehicle port, the van started to swerve. Perhaps the driver was reaching for his partner's radio to tip-tap his simplified Morse codes and claim his innocence. He would not manage it. "This is for all my friends who sacrificed themselves in that tunnel explosion to distract you," Alex screamed. The quick-witted creativity made Ewan smile. "For those who died before them, for my family inside New London, and for every dead body you and your bosses are responsible for. Good morning and good night, Mr. Salter. I hope your death is more fiery than all the clones combined. At least they didn't choose their jobs." Ewan was expecting sniper bullets to rattle through the van as if from a machine gun. He had not predicted that a dozen rockets would soar from the battlements to the road, from launchers that must have been stationed there for large targets. The first wave of rockets formed craters in the ground where the speeding van had been moments earlier. "Ewan, go!" Alex screamed into the radio. "Now!" Clones were not stupid, but they were hopelessly robotic in their obedience. Messages had been relayed. Snipers had reassessed their main targets. Each one had calculated the van of fictional explosives to be the bigger priority, and had each made the same choice to withdraw their focus from the tunnel. Ewan leapt to his feet, and nobody shot him. He called back to a surprised Jack and an exhausted Kate, yelling for them to follow him outside. A second wave of rockets was fired towards the distant van as the Underdogs made a break for freedom, and Ewan glanced to his right as one hot rocket hit the van straight on its bumper. At 5 o'clock in the morning on day 4, the Underdogs' longest and most arduous mission of all time ended with one final explosion. Within half a minute, Ewan, Kate, and Jack had reached the safe side of the hill without a shot fired towards them. End of chapter 27.
Is it end of the violence as well?
It is the end of the violence. Chapter 28 is entirely in Spitfire's Rise.
Yeah, I see Rod's name after quite a while.
Yes. So yes, the other 3 made it. Even Alex made it.
Even Alex made it. Yep, stuff. So much happened there.
Yeah, I've forgotten how
UB
action
again?
packed. Yeah, when I think of the finale to Underdogs 1, I think of, obviously, Ewan and Charlie. I think of the Clone Factory. I keep remembering chapter 27 as a kind of, and then they got out chapter. I keep, like the whole novel in general, I've kind of forgotten exactly how intense that and then they got out actually is.
I thought I was ready for the grand finale, but I wasn't ready for the
I can assure you the final chapter is more relaxing. Right. And there aren't any sudden cliffhanger endings or anything like that because it's the end of the book. Oh, and also at the time, I was advised to write Underdogs 1 as a standalone book because there was no certainty the book 2 would be published. So there's no cliffhanger or anything like that. I'm not saying anything about the other ones once the series actually was commissioned, but Underdogs works well enough as a standalone book that even if you listen to chapter 28 and then quit the series, I'd like to think it's still a satisfying experience.
But then, I kind of wonder if, how would the start of the second book be? I want to read the second book now.
Well,
there's no cliffhanger. What's going to happen next?
Well, let's wait until next month.
Yeah.
So, shall I begin chapter 28?
Is everybody good with Chris starting chapter 28? Give me a thumbs up, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah,
chapter 28.
Yes. And Aisha is also looking forward to the next chapter.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and...
Final chapter.
Final chapter.
It's been, what, more than a year since we started these sessions, and here we are, final chapter of book 1.
A year? I feel like it just started. I mean, I feel like it's been a couple of months only.
We've averaged around 2 chapters a month.
2 chapters a month.
So, yeah, it must have been a year.
It's been a year.
So without further ado, Raj's chess skills had evaporated since Kate had said goodbye. He was still destroying Simon, but it was no consolation. Next to the game, Thomas rested the tip of his nose against the coffee table, crossing his eyes in boredom. Simon had never been a chess expert, although to his credit, he had learned how most of the pieces moved. But that morning, he had stopped trying to win from move 1. He had not been the same since he had returned from the health centre, and finally accepted that his friends were probably dead. Thomas had sulked too, but over the following days, he seemed to have changed for the better. He had started to smile and had stopped crying, although neither seemed genuine. Perhaps he's remembered that losing his mum was tougher, and so was takeover day. Or perhaps he's just being him and trying to cheer everyone else up. Raj was 3 moves from checkmate when Simon resigned. His friend did not knock over his king. He just started to pack away his pieces. The life had drained from Simon in recent days, and Raj racked his brains for words of encouragement. About 10 minutes longer than usual, that was. Simon didn't even nod. Raj opened his mouth for another try, but Thomas leapt up and started to make shrill noises. Raj had not even noticed the opening door, but McCormick had entered the living room with Gracie hiding behind him. That meant the comms unit was empty, so for better or worse, the mission was over. "McCormick!" Thomas shrieked. At the mention of his name, Lorraine ran in from the kitchen, and Mark followed with vague interest. There was a silence of anticipation as their leader stood before them, worn and exhausted, but somehow looking rejuvenated. "Please, God, let him be smiling for a real reason. Please don't let him be faking it for us like Thomas." "Ladies and gentlemen," McCormick announced, "I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news first, of course." Raj took a deep breath that mirrored McCormick's. "It is my sad duty to confirm the loss of one of our friends," McCormick started, with the voice that balanced his leadership tone with his personal grief. "I have to report the death of Charlie, who gave his very best to the mission at the expense of his own life." Raj gritted his teeth. It was never easy when McCormick announced a death, but the worst part was the guilt, because every time a casualty was mentioned by name, Raj felt terrible for his relief that the name wasn't Kate's. But why is he only confirming one death? "We had the pleasure of Charlie's company for 11 months, McCormick continued, and we came to know his colourful character very deeply. And to know this group well enough to believe we'll remember his enthusiasm, determination, and diligence before we remember the challenges he arrived here with. More than anything else, we can remember him in the knowledge that he died protecting a friend. Ewan promises me it was the very last thing he did." "You spoke to Ewan?" asked Lorraine. "Yes, which leads me to the good news. Don't be afraid of the sudden mood change, my friends. Charlie would have wanted it." McCormick's fist rapped against the door, and, on cue, the handle turned. The room sprung into rapturous cheering and applause as the impossible happened. Ewan, Kate, Jack, and Alex entered the living room, arms held high and victory grins plastered from ear to ear. The dead had returned to life. The war was no longer lost, and Raj laid eyes on Kate for the first time in half a week. Amidst the cheering, whooping, hugs of reunion, and the joy that could only have come from close friends being reunited against the odds, Jack raised his hand in an attempt to quell the atmosphere. "Guys," he began, as Raj shed a happy tear, "that's not even the good bit. The clone factory has been destroyed." Raj had been to FA Cup finals, that's like football finals over here. They did not they did not match the passion and ecstasy in his friend's roars. He leapt to his feet, made his way across the room and wrapped his arms around the best girlfriend in the world. Kate surprised him with a kiss, appearing to no longer care about who knew about their relationship. Thomas was laughing for real again. The smile had returned to Simon's face. Lorraine could be seen in the kitchen gathering glasses for a celebratory toast. Even Mark was shaking hands with his colleagues, the underdogs who had dived into hell and come back smiling. Except Ewan, Raj noticed. The strike team leader leant himself against the door frame with his arms folded, wearing a fake smile on his lips that didn't match the rest of his face. He drank the contents of the glass as soon as it was given to him, then skulked out of the room, tapping McCormick's shoulder on the way. Raj knew better than to follow. Ewan reached the memorial wall half a minute before McCormick, and went through the major points in his head one last time. The underdog's leader followed him into the cellar, with a predictable smile of sympathy on his face. "I've asked Lorraine to set up the clinic," he started. "If you don't get up that arm seen too quickly, you might lose it. I need to know whether we're safe," Ewan said. "Pardon?" "Grant's known our names for almost a month. It's only a matter of time before he searches our old houses and finds us in yours. If we're in danger, the others deserve to know." McCormick lifted his eyes and checked every corner of the room. With nobody listening, he spoke softly. "This may be my home, Ewan," he started, "but it's not my house. Not technically, anyway." Ewan was not in the mood for a coded, non-literal conversation. He needed a clear and specific answer, and he needed it right then. Where are we really? Where are we really? He asked. "Polly Jones's house," Polly. Do you remember Polly? Ewan's eyes drifted to the top of the memorial wall. Maybe her name should have. After Barbara died, McCormick continued, I almost lost everything. Up here, I mean. He pointed to the side of his head with a delicate finger. I was alone up in Durham. I quit my university post for mental health reasons and withdrew a little further from civilization each day. And then came Polly. She knew you when you were kids, right? She knew Barbara, yes. She called me a few months after the funeral to see how I was coping. There were little ripples in the tone of McCormick's voice, and Ewan was unsure how to react. He wasn't used to real adults trusting him with emotionally charged information. I emptied everything during that phone call, all my sadness, my frustration, my anger towards the world and everything in it. And she took me in. She invited me down to London, transported my things, and let me live with her. Barbara may have been the woman who turned me into a man, but Polly was the reason I survived after she was gone. So, this was her house all along? Asked Ewan, his heartbeat steadying. Not yours? Legally, yes. I lived here, but officially I was just a guest staying for a very long time. And in that time, she found me a therapist, helped me get a job at Greenwich University, and pushed my life back in the right direction. But on takeover day, yeah, interrupted Ewan with a bitter voice. I know. Ewan shook his head, emptying his brain of its thoughts like a mental sieve. As sad as it sounds, McCormick continued, there's no written evidence Polly and I were ever friends. But on the plus side, that's why we'll never be found here. That and the thermal blocker keeping our body heat off their scans, Ewan said. Yes, I thank your father's soul for that every day. But we're safe here, Ewan, and that's the end of it. If Ewan knew about my connection to Polly, he'd have flattened this place long ago. The answer satisfied Ewan, but he didn't budge. What else is there, Ewan? Charlie. You don't have to talk about this now, said McCormick. Give yourself time if you need it. I'm not going anywhere. Ewan clawed a hand against the memorial wall, and his breaths quickened. He had done his hero duty for the day, and his vulnerable side crept back into his head. He died too early, he gasped. It's not right. We weren't done with him yet. I think I see what you mean. We were shaping him into the person he'd always wanted to be. He was overcoming new things every day. Another few months and he'd have been everything he wanted. But even after everything we did, he still ended up dead. It's like all our efforts were for nothing. And I can't help but feel, what about the others? There's only 11 of us left. Well, 12 including Shannon. Are we wasting our time with them too? Is it really worth helping people if they don't even live to... Ewan coughed as the cellar's dust lodged in the back of his throat. He abandoned the rest of his sentence and let McCormick respond. It is absolutely worth helping them, Ewan, whether they live or not. Barbara and I donated each month to the Waking Dreams Foundation for children with terminal illnesses. Was their work worth it, do you think? Yeah. Honourable, anyway. Polly volunteered at a hospice that looked after the elderly in their final days. You'd never have convinced her it was all for nothing. Ewan found the old man's hand resting on his shoulder and allowed it to stay. And he allowed it to stay. Ewan, if you think of life advice as something that leads to an ultimate result, you'll never know when you get there. When someone dies, you won't be able to see how much you've helped them. You'll just be left bitter about not doing enough. But it's not the finishing point that matters. Then what does? Making the right differences at the right time. Simon's been a project of mine ever since we met. We helped Thomas recover after Beth died. And earlier this week, we were blessed with another person to build up. Even if we never completed our work with Charlie, we transformed him from the boy he used to be. More importantly, what we did for him stuck in his heart. He spent his final days as the best person he had ever been. And that mattered. Ewan opened his mouth, closed it again, half opened, and then spoke. Thank you. Feeling better? Maybe one day. Ewan turned, and McCormick's hand left his shoulder. He caught sight of the memorial wall and pictured the name of Charlie Coleman chiselled into the rock. It would only be a matter of time. You're the perfect example of a changed man, Ewan, said McCormick. When I compare that vicious boy who came here on Could you please stop mentioning Takeover Day, gasped Ewan. I know what kind of guy I was, and I know what I did. And none of it matters, McCormick answered, because that Ewan West no longer exists. You came out of the other side, and you should be proud of it. Ewan wiped the first tears from his eyes. McCormick was right as always, and just as Ewan had once said to Charlie, it was time to stop letting his past control his future. Come on, my friend, said McCormick with his warmest smile. Let's get you to the clinic. One drink before the final scene. "You're a lucky sod, Ewan," said Lorraine as they walked up the stairs together. "It's never luck," he snarled. "Managed to get in just one more time before the end." "Just so you know how serious this is, we've got Kate and Alex with gunshot wounds, and I'm still treating you first. You're looking at septicemia if we leave that wound much longer." "Have you got the medicine or not?" "Yes, and enough to heal you if you do exactly what I say. None of your defiant attitude, okay?" It's called pathological demand avoidance, Ewan thought, but nobody here knows except Kate and Jack. And it's staying that way. I escaped with personnel files for each of us, but what a pity mine just happened to get destroyed on the way home. "I've left the correct dosage on the bedside table," Lorraine finished. "Take it, then meet me in the kitchen. That wound needs washing, and I'm boiling some more to clean. I could have done it before you'd arrived if anyone had let me know you were coming." Ewan smirked. He'd barely been home half an hour, and Lorraine's delight had already turned into uncompromising bossiness. It was the Lorraine he knew and appreciated. She let him into the clinic and headed back upstairs. Ewan looked at the bedside table and found a mug with his pills. On the bed, Shannon looked surprised to see him. "Yeah, I'm alive," Ewan muttered. "Great to see you too." Shannon maintained her stare, but showed no emotion. Given what he had learned about her, Ewan didn't mind. She had probably spent her whole life internalizing her feelings. "Your memory stick worked." For that moment, at least, the internalizing stopped. Shannon's eyes lit up, and she grinned. "I didn't see it myself," Ewan continued, "so I can't tell you how good it looked." Shannon rolled her eyes and gave no further response. Ewan swallowed the pills and sat himself at the other end of the bed. Lorraine could wait. "I know you've kept your end of the deal," he said, "and we'll keep ours. But don't think your work's done. I've got an army down there who think the war's already won, that all we need to do is wait for a few months for the last clones to age themselves to death. But there are other citadels, and they all have clone factories, and they've got loads of transport vehicles too. We've slowed them down, not stopped them." Again, Shannon didn't answer. "Fine," Ewan snarled. "Be silent if you bloody want. My best friend died this morning because he wouldn't talk." She looked up at him with an expression that might have meant sympathy. "Wait," Ewan said with a shake of his head. "I'm sorry, that's not fair. I'd have taken him to the officers' sector anyway, even if we hadn't needed to research you." Suddenly, Shannon grew concerned. Her eyes widened, her jaw dropped open, and Ewan could hear her quickening breaths. "And yes," he said, "you were easy enough to find. Your file was pretty much blank, but I saw what I needed to. I thought Rose was your last name, not your middle name. You did well to silence Keith Tyler before he could finish the sentence. As in, this lovely lady is Shannon Rose." Shannon's hand moved towards her pocket, and Ewan noticed. "Whatever sharp object you're hiding, don't bother. I've done enough fighting today and I just can't be asked. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that nothing's going to change." The colour in Shannon's face lightened. Ewan spoke softly. "You can't help being the daughter of Nicholas Grant. And you won't be judged for it. We're the guys who invented the Oakenfold Code. We know it's our choices that make us who we are, not just how we're born. And you chose to escape your father, get out of New London with Anthony Lambourne, and help bring him down from the outside." Shannon Rose Grant buried her head in her hands and then broke her silence. "I didn't choose to escape," she whispered. "We were forced to flee." There was a 5-second pause before Shannon's head lifted from her hands and stared at Ewan with watery eyes. "My father knew who you were, thanks to your friend Daniel," she continued. "Before we left, Anthony used thermal imaging to look for you. We found active bodies in a disused health centre and just assumed it was you. I even printed out the list of your names to show McCormick you were in danger. But when we got there, we found a completely different group who had no interest in fighting. They realised they were detectable and planned to pack up their things and evacuate up north. But my father found them the same way we did. Maybe a few days from now, he'll find you too." "He won't," answered Ewan. "Not if he's relying on thermal vision. Trust me." Shannon lifted her head, her face full of tears. "So what happens now?" she asked as Ewan rose to his feet. "Right now," he said, walking to the door. "Oh, last page. I'm going to clean my arm, then have a drink for my dead friend. When everything calms down, I'll tell the others about you. And then? Then they'll realise how useful you are. My rucksack's full of your father's plans, and you could be the key to stopping all of them. You've already struck a nice blow against him, Shannon. Might as well finish him off." Ewan opened the door to the hallway and was halfway out before her voice stopped him. "You're a good man, Ewan." He turned around, puzzled. "What?" "I see the same look in your face as the one I grew up with," Shannon continued with a hint of a smile. The look people have when they believe they're defective or useless, when they're taught to believe it. It was Ewan's turn to be silenced. You have every reason to hate me. Your friend's dead, and I'm the daughter of the guy who made it happen. But instead, you sat next to me and told me nothing would change. It takes a special kind of strength to do that. The daughter of Nicholas Grant lay down on the bed, relaxed and at home in Spitfire's eyes. You're not defective, Ewan, she continued. You're not broken. You're not the wrong kind of person. And don't let anyone in this world tell you otherwise. You and your friends are exactly who they're meant to be. Ewan could not bring himself to smile, but he took the time to reply. The world's about to see who we really are, he finished, before closing the clinic door and heading downstairs to celebrate Charlie's birthday. End of book 1.
I love the ending. I love,
Thank you.
love the ending. And now I know what the second book's gonna be. I mean, I can at least guess. So,
Mhm.
Nicholas Grant's daughter. Wow.
I liked watching your face when I read that line.
I was. Oh my god. Oh wow. Okay, when are we
Hmm.
starting part 2?
Well, next time we have a session.
All right. Well, we gotta start on part 2. Well, I do remember that I did promise that we're gonna give away one of the books in this series. I'm not sure if anyone's watching right now. So for part 2, if anybody wants to win part 2, I just have a fun question. In last episode or session, we did share the name of Chris's new book. So if any one of you can let me know what his new book's name is, then we will be sending you a part 2 of Underdogs. Um, yeah, so you can just either comment or email or no searching on the internet though, no Googling.
Yeah. And my lips are metaphorically sealed.
I did notice. Well, if I'm going to give away the name, I mean, part of the name, if I ask. Steph
Mhm.
already has book 2. Well, Steph, I
Oh,
think you
thank
were.
you.
I don't. Have you read book 2 already? Like the entire book 2?
I think Steph hasn't read any of the physical books. She has been specifically saving it for these sessions, which has been quite lovely. Correct me
Oh. Oh,
if
don't read book 2 as well then. Oh, well, we're going to start those as well. I did remember. I think it was Ewan's cousin who was named.
you was. Oh yes,
Yes.
yes.
Am I right? Is there a connection
Yeah.
or
If you're enough of a oh no not at all.
not at all?
And
Okay.
I try to. The thing is that there's this theory that all of Quentin Tarantino's films happen in the same universe, and I, there's a theory that all Black Mirror episodes are in the same universe. And as much as I started out writing with an idea of wouldn't it be great if all of the books I publish are kind of in the same universe, I decided very early, given the first one I published was Underdogs, no, bad idea. Because there's another story I wrote called Dead Boy Running, which is about, say, a 12-year-old orphan who's trying to escape the gangs that he's sheltering with, and this policeman who's trying to save him. And it's a lovely, heart-wrenching book, but it needs to be in a different universe to Underdogs, because if all my books are in the same series, then every non-dystopian book ultimately ends with the characters either dead or imprisoned inside the citadels. So yeah, the most recent fiction book I published is absolutely not connected to Underdogs at all.
Not connected. Okay. Well,
Especially given that Ewan's cousin dies at the age of 8 on Takeover Day, and this character is older than 8.
let's not give the name of the character away because that's going to give away the name of the book.
I've done my best. Yeah, I've done my absolute best to not say the name of Ewan's cousin, but yeah.
Well, it has been a lovely session, Chris.
Hmm. Well,
Well,
the second half of it was lovely.
yeah. No, well, I'm not just talking about the session per se. I'm talking about the whole series. Thank you so much for
Mm,
doing this with us. I'm already looking forward to um, the next um,
mhm,
Underdogs book. I'm sorry, whenever there's a comment, I'm like I lose my trail of words and then I get focused. And
mm,
but we're all neurodivergent here, so I think everybody can understand.
mhm,
And I like the idea of the alternate universe stuff.
mhm,
Rufe, let me give you a hint. Um, it's it involves Rubik cubes.
mhm. Yeah, just to clarify, it's a fiction book, not a non-fiction book. This is the non-fiction book that you're probably referring to, the one which literally it's just been released, and nearly 800 copies of this book landed on my doorstep this morning. And yeah, this is 150 autistic children, teenagers, and adults from 22 different countries around the world, all telling the reader what they love most about life. So very, very shamelessly positive because we deserve it.
How many copies did you get today, Chris?
Um, just under 800.
Okay, well, those are a lot.
Yep.
Those are a lot. I wonder where you're
Oh yeah,
storing them.
there's a whole pallet of them about that big outside my front door, and I had to carry them in one box at a time before it started raining. And we get to keep the pallet as well. I'm open to ideas on what to do with a big wooden pallet that all my books are on.
Well, you can make a table out of the wooden pallet. It's fun. I saw a
Possibly, yeah.
DIY project, yeah, the other day.
Oh, my partner's quite arty. I'm sure she'll find some kind of creative project for it.
All right, well, it's been a fun ride, Chris, and thank you
Yes.
so much for doing this with us. And I'm looking forward to book two. Aman is going to reach out to you um, to see if book two is possible for the book reading. I would essentially love to do all of the Underdogs book.
Mhm.
I would order the physical copy, but it's more fun doing this with you. So thank you so much. If you want to share any updates about you or let people know what to look forward to, that's great. Otherwise, I think it's a wrap.
Mm-hmm. Steph saying pics where it didn't happen. Funny enough, there actually is a picture of the big pallet of books outside my back door in the Patreon supporters group that you're a part of.
Oh, I'm gonna look at
So
that
there.
later.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I think we're done. Am I okay to show you the cover of book two?
Yes.
For a long time, this book was my favourite thing I'd ever written. Except then I wrote book three, Acceleration, and it just completely blasted tooth and nail out of the water, and the original Underdogs. But to this day, it is actually no, it might be the third best thing because Uprising is also awesome. But it does to this day remain my favourite looking cover. It is Underdogs Tooth and Nail,
Ooh,
book two.
I like the colors.
Yep.
This is
What you
really
looking
great.
for?
I actually have a question. So, am I
Yeah.
am I allowed to ask right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, I was thinking you talked about how the first book was a standalone book initially, right? And then you ended up writing the whole series. So,
Mhm.
when you were starting book two, what thoughts did you have? How did you know this is where I want to, continue?
Well, it's when I say the first one was a standalone book, I only really mean that in the publishing sense. I mean, when I started the Underdog series, the original plan, ridiculous as it was for a 10-part novel series with 21 underdogs. That was back when I believed that publishers would accept 10-book series from unpublished authors and believed that readers could memorize 21 names and characters at the same time, just right off the bat. I then revised it to 4 books with 13 main characters. And even then, people were trying to get me to reduce the character count, but no. 13 is right. And I am. Originally, the prologue to Underdogs Tooth and Nail was the ending to book one. So there was, I'm not sure quite a cliffhanger, but it basically reveals what book two is going to be about. I was then advised, no, don't put that in there, because what happens if either the book completely flops or if the publisher goes bust, and then you've got this cliffhanger but no book to follow it up with. So the best way of doing it was basically, if you've read the Hunger Games trilogy, book one works perfectly as a standalone book. I mean, the story of book one ends perfectly. There is still clearly a lot more to happen in this world that Katniss and Peter are in. There's so much more story to tell, but the story of that book is just perfectly concluded. But at the end of the second one, the second Hunger Games book does end in a cliffhanger, and well, because by that point it was really obvious that both Catching Fire and Mockingjay, both books 2 and 3, were clearly going to get published. So that is why Underdogs book 1 kind of I'm trying not to directly compare it to the Hunger Games, because obviously not, but in a similar vein, there is a lot more story to happen in the Underdogs world, but the story of book 1 is concluded neatly. And honestly, it's kind of similar with book 2. I'm not saying anything about what I do in the penultimate book whilst leading up to the finale, but the further along you can go in the series and the more sure you are, especially after the contract is signed, then you can start putting in your cliffhangers. But now, I knew, in answer to your question, I knew all along where the series was going to go. I didn't necessarily know how specifically it was going to get there, but I knew the basic moves of the whole series, and it was just a matter of adapting things for publication, like making book 1 a standalone and only going into things that could be regarded as cliffhangers after it became obvious that the rest of the series was going to be published.
Is there a book in the Underdog series that does not have a death in it?
This is a war novel series.
I know.
You also didn't specify whether these are underdog deaths or other people deaths.
Oh,
So I would advise you not to clarify that question. But
I don't know.
I can answer the one you literally asked. Are there any Underdogs novels that have literally zero death? No, there are not.
Okay. Right. Steph doesn't want you to tell her who's going to die in book 2.
Who's going to die in book 2? Your sanity. Your soul will be a casualty of reading book 2.
All right, I think that's it for our finale for Underdogs. You know, at the time you wrote this book, you didn't know that there's going to be a part 2, and then now there's like part 2, part 3, and so on. But if you knew there's... I'm sorry, what?
I was hoping that the publisher would accept a book 2, and I'd kind of planned it with that in mind. But, well, like I said, you stay on the safe side. You pretend that you're only going to publish 1, but you leave it. Oh, Steph Sanity died a long time ago. I'm sorry if I played any part in that. You were saying, sorry.
But if you knew that there was going to be a part 2, what title would you have given part 1?
Well, originally there were titles for. Okay, I'll give you the original titles for 4 books. First one was Underdogs: The Lucky 13.
Okay.
Because obviously, once Shannon Rise, there's 13 of them. Number 2, Underdogs: Outnumbered, Outgunned. Number 3, Underdogs: Tooth and Nail. Because I wrote a Sonic fanfiction story when I was 21 called Sonic the Hedgehog Tooth and Nail, and it was magnificent. But I also like the title Tooth and Nail, so I am. And number 4, it was only ever a working title. I knew it wasn't a good one, but it was just a stand-in title, Underdogs Rule Britannia, because it's like the end of the war for Britain. And when the publisher said yes to Underdogs 2, whilst talking it through, he said, "Okay, do you have any ideas on a title?" And I said, "Underdogs Outnumbered, Outgunned." And he paused and said, "Okay, well, let's keep our options open." I thought, okay, well, even I can take a hint like that. So I basically stole tooth and nail from the third one, made it the second one, and I'm very glad that I did, because leaving aside what acceleration actually means in the context of book 3, just Underdogs Acceleration itself is one heck of a title.
Okay.
I did a lot of wrestling for the fourth one, though. It was going to be Underdogs Defiance, then it was going to be Underdogs something else, can't remember. It took me a while to make a piece of Underdogs Uprising, but I am satisfied in the end we made the right choice.
Well, the names are interesting, especially the second one, Tooth and Nail. Kind of like, there's going to be something, I think guess.
It was because there's a lot of desperation in the second book. I'm not going to give away the details of the plot, but I'll tell you basically what the stakes are. In book number 1, they either destroy the clone factory or they die, and they don't have enough soldiers left to put a meaningful resistance. The stuff that goes on in Tooth and Nail, either they win or they are eliminated.
Don't give me spoilers. No, don't tell me. Don't. Does anyone want to know?
It's not what it's actually about, but basically it is a must-win battle. You either win this or you're out of the war.
Okay.
Even if you live, you're out of the war.
Okay.
And those are all the details I'm going to give.
Okay, well, those are good details. Those don't give a lot away. But now that it's more questions coming in my mind.
Going back to what you originally said, Underdogs 1 was going to be Underdogs The Lucky 13. I still think that was a decent title, but
it was.
I still think we made the right decision to not have it because, well, people already get confused about, wait, Tooth and Nail Acceleration, which one's the second, which one's the third? If I'd given actually, even now when I've got Underdogs, when I'm doing bookstores and things, I always keep book 1 on the left, Underdogs, book 2 in the middle, and book 3 on the right. And people will still look at one that's called Underdogs Acceleration, one that's called Underdogs Tooth and Nail, and one that's literally just called Underdogs, and they'll still ask, wait, which one's the first? So the easier you can make it for the reader, it's I know that Harry Potter managed to get away with it, calling there wasn't one to be called Harry Potter. It was Harry Potter and the this, that, and the other. That worked basically because they have Bloomsbury as a publisher, and also the marketing did an extremely good job. But you want to play it safe, like even in the Hunger Games, it's the Hunger Games Catching Fire, the Hunger Games Mockingjay. I think it's a nice common sense way of doing things. So as much as I liked Underdogs The Lucky 13, getting rid of it made it simpler and more accessible for readers who hadn't ever seen this series before.
That makes sense. I mean, see, I'm not an author because you can tell that, because if I had to name Underdogs 1, I would have said Loss of a Temper Twin, and that would have given everything away. So I'm glad I'm not the author here, and I think the readers are glad too. But yeah, thank you so much.
Prepare yourself.
Prepare yourself. Well, that's a better idea. I think that would have been great. But I like the Lucky 13. I think that would have made a pretty decent title.
Underdogs, you will love this book and also hate it. Comes with an extra padded cover for when you throw it across the room.
I think with Harry Potter, the first part of Harry Potter was not always the Sorcerer's Stone, right? Or the
no, it's still to this day not the Sorcerer's Stone here. It's always been Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, but in a move which I'm hoping the publisher regrets, they renamed it in the American market for as the Sorcerer's Stone because they basically underestimated American children and thought, oh, they're not going to be clever enough to know what a philosopher is. If they're clever enough to read Harry Potter, then you can put some faith in them that they can at least learn what a philosopher is. But maybe they're thinking from the marketing side of it, no one's going to buy a book unless they already know what a philosopher is. But,
and I thought the author maybe changed her mind. Oh, okay.
No, it was always Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Over here in Britain, it just always has been. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the English-speaking world, but I think it might only be America where they simplified the title due to well, in my head, it's underestimating the audience.
That's very ableist, but
Well, I think it was quite ableist of them.
yeah. Anywho, it was a good discussion. It makes me a little angry at the publisher, but that's okay.
Yeah, it was probably the marketing department rather than anyone involved with the creative process.
Yeah. All right, then I think this is it. Chris, we're going to reach out to you about the second book reading, Tooth and Nail, coming up soon. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.
United by differences, everyone.
United by differences. And stream.